All right, so we're going to dive into something pretty fascinating today.
Okay.
You've shared some sources on psychological warfare,
Right.
including some material on the 2019 Venezuelan blackout.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine an entire country suddenly plunged into darkness,
Oh, wow.
hospitals struggling,
Oh, God.
transportation paralyzed, daily life just in chaos.
Yeah.
That was Venezuela in 2019.
Wow.
And the cause. Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
There were two very different explanations floating around.
Okay.
One was straightforward, government incompetence, a crumbling infrastructure.
Right.
Basically, a massive failure on the Maduro government's part.
Mm-hmm.
But then there was the second explanation,
Yeah?
a lot more intriguing.
Okay.
A U.S. cyber attack. A deliberate act of modern psychological warfare.
What makes the Venezuelan blackout such a compelling case study is the way both sides managed to present narratives that seemed plausible.
Right.
Maduro supporters could easily point to the U.S.'s history of intervention in Latin America,
Yeah.
especially when valuable resources like oil are involved.
Of course.
And those critical of Maduro had years of economic mismanagement and political turmoil to draw on.
So how do we even begin to untangle a situation like this?
Right.
It feels like we're already in the midst of a psychological operation,
Yeah.
just trying to figure out what really happened.
You've hit on a key point.
Okay.
That lack of clarity, the fog of information, that's one of the things that makes psychological warfare so effective.
Yeah.
It allows for something called plausible deniability.
Mm.
No one can definitively prove who was responsible.
Right.
So doubt lingers.
Yeah.
Narratives take hold,
Yeah.
and the seeds of distrust are sown.
Okay, so let's unpack this idea of cyber attacks as a form of modern psychological warfare.
Okay.
One of the sources mentioned this U.S. program, Nitro Zeus. What can you tell us about that?
So Nitro Zeus was reportedly a highly classified cyber weapon developed by the United States,
Okay.
specifically designed to disrupt the electrical grids of adversary nations, including Iran.
Wow.
Imagine the potential impact.
Yeah.
A country's lights go out.
Wow.
Communication networks fail.
Right.
Hospitals can't function.
Yeah.
And suddenly there's widespread panic
Yeah.
and a sense that the government is completely incapable of providing basic security.
Right.
That psychological impact.
Yeah.
That can be far more powerful than any physical weapon.
And that's not just a hypothetical scenario, right?
Right.
There's a history of these types of attacks.
There certainly is a pattern of cyber activity, targeting countries that resist U.S. influence.
Okay.
We've seen similar tactics allegedly used against Iran's nuclear program
Right.
and North Korea's missile launches.
Yeah.
And it's worth noting that these countries, along with Venezuela,
Yeah.
they all have something else in common.
Okay.
They've all challenged U.S. dominance when it comes to control of resources,
Right.
particularly oil.
Yeah.
Venezuela, with its resource nationalism policy, is a prime example. This policy prioritizes national control of resources
Yeah.
and often restricts foreign involvement.
So you can see how that might create tension with a superpower accustomed to having a say in global energy markets.
Absolutely.
So this resource nationalism is essentially saying, our resources, our rules.
Right.
But that can come with consequences if you're pushing back against a major player like the U.S.
Yeah.
So we're seeing the strategy play out in the 21st century with cyber warfare. But this idea of attacking the enemy's mind,
Right.
using fear and disruption to achieve strategic goals,
Yeah.
that's not a new concept, is it?
Not at all.
Okay.
You know, Sun Tzu's famous quote,
Yeah.
"Supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting."
Right.
That's from The Art of War, written centuries ago. And it perfectly encapsulates the essence of psychological warfare.
Yeah.
Throughout history, we've seen leaders employ tactics designed to demoralize, disorient,
Right.
and ultimately control their adversaries.
Okay, give us some examples. How did this play out before the age of cyber warfare?
Imagine the psychological impact of encountering a Mongol army
Yeah.
and seeing towers built entirely from the skulls of their enemies.
Oh, wow.
That's not just brute force.
Yeah.
That's a deliberate tactic to instill terror.
Wow.
Or think about the use of war elephants.
Right.
It wasn't just their size. It was
Yeah.
the sheer psychological effect of these massive creatures charging into battle,
Wow.
often adorned with armor and carrying warriors.
Right.
Even something as seemingly simple as the Aztec death whistles.
Huh. Interesting.
These small clay whistles, when blown, produced a piercing, otherworldly sound
Oh.
that was deeply unsettling.
Yeah.
Imagine hearing hundreds of those on a battlefield.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
The goal was to create psychological disruption,
Yeah.
break the enemy's morale before the fighting even began.
These examples, they're so vivid,
Right.
so brutal.
Yeah.
It really drives home the point that psychological warfare has always been a part of human conflict.
Absolutely.
And even when it's less overtly violent,
Right.
the goal remains the same:
Yeah.
to influence, disrupt, and ultimately control. We see this with tactics like disinformation, right?
Yeah.
One of your sources mentioned the U.S. radio broadcasts aimed at Cuba in the 1980s.
That's a great example of what we call information warfare,
Okay.
a subset of psychological warfare focused on manipulating information.
Okay.
Those U.S. broadcasts weren't just about sharing news or music.
Right.
They were carefully crafted to portray the Castro regime as incompetent and out of touch. The aim was to sow seeds of discontent among the Cuban people, hoping to weaken the regime from within.
So it's about shaping the narrative.
Yeah.
Controlling the information people receive to make them question their leadership,
Right.
their institutions.
Yeah.
It's almost like a virus, infiltrating the minds of your enemy.
That's a powerful way to put it.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is how these tactics, whether it's a Tower of Skulls or a carefully worded radio broadcast,
Right.
tap into fundamental human instincts. Our responses to fear and uncertainty.
Yeah.
When people feel like their basic needs,
Yeah.
security, stability, access to essential services,
Right.
are threatened.
Yeah.
They become vulnerable to manipulation.
Right.
That's what makes psychological warfare so potent.
Yeah.
It bypasses physical defenses
Right.
and goes straight for the heart of a nation's resilience, the minds of its people.
Right.
That's really what it is.
Okay, so we've seen how psychological warfare has evolved from, these ancient battlefields to the digital age.
Right.
But are there any, frameworks or models
Yeah.
that help us understand how modern militaries think about this type of warfare?
There are, and they're surprisingly relevant to what we've been discussing.
Okay.
One that stands out is Colonel John Warden's 5 rings theory.
Okay.
He conceptualizes an enemy's strength as 5 concentric rings,
Okay.
with leadership at the very center. The outermost ring represents the general population.
Okay.
And moving inward, you have infrastructure, essential systems, and the military.
Right.
His theory argues that to cripple an enemy,
Yeah.
you don't necessarily need to defeat their entire military.
Okay.
Instead, you target the ring.
Yeah.
That will have the most devastating ripple effect.
I see.
For example, by disrupting a country's power grid, you not only create chaos and hardship for the population,
Right.
but you also disable their military's ability to communicate and operate effectively.
Oh, wow.
You've essentially cut off the head by attacking the body.
That's a pretty powerful image.
Right.
So it's not just about brute force.
No.
It's about strategically targeting vulnerabilities to achieve maximum psychological impact.
Exactly.
This reminds me of something else mentioned in one of the sources.
Yeah.
The idea that attacking systems perceived as under government control, things like the economy,
Yeah.
infrastructure, healthcare, can be a highly effective way to undermine public trust and create this internal pressure.
Exactly. That's a key insight from cybersecurity expert Thornton Trump.
Okay.
He argues that by disrupting these essential systems, you create a sense of vulnerability and helplessness among the population.
Yeah.
People start to question the government's competence,
Yeah.
their ability to protect them and provide for their basic needs.
Right.
And that erosion of trust
Yeah.
can be incredibly destabilizing.
It's almost like turning the enemy's own systems against them.
Right.
You create this feedback loop
Yeah.
where the harder the government tries to maintain control, the more chaotic things become,
Right.
and the further that public trust erodes.
Precisely. And this brings us back to information warfare
Okay.
we touched on earlier.
Yeah.
Remember the stab-in-the-back myth that circulated in Germany after World War I?
Yes, the idea that Germany wasn't defeated on the battlefield but betrayed by civilians and politicians back home.
Exactly. That's a classic example of how a fabricated narrative, skillfully disseminated, can shape public perception and have long-lasting consequences.
Wow.
The stab-in-the-back myth wasn't just a historical footnote.
Right.
It fueled resentment, undermined democratic institutions, and contributed to the rise of extremism in Germany,
Wow.
ultimately paving the way for World War II.
That's a chilling reminder of how powerful these narratives can be, especially when people are already feeling vulnerable and uncertain.
Exactly.
And this is where things get Really interesting.
Yeah.
And perhaps even more challenging in the digital age, right?
Yeah.
The internet and social media have completely changed the landscape when it comes to information warfare.
Absolutely. The sheer volume of information available,
Yeah.
the speed at which it spreads,
Yes.
and the difficulty in discerning truth from falsehood
Right.
have created a perfect storm for disinformation campaigns.
Right.
In the past, governments or powerful institutions controlled the flow of information.
Yeah.
Now with the internet, anyone can publish anything,
Right.
and it can spread globally in an instant.
It's like Alvin Toffler predicted in his third wave theory, right?
Right.
He argued that information itself would become the dominant force in society, the key to power and control.
Exactly. And we see this playing out in real time with strategies like the one outlined by Russian General Gerasimov.
Okay.
He advocates for a new type of warfare that blends information operations with political unrest to destabilize adversaries. Think of it as a more subtle, insidious form of conflict, one that exploits the very fabric of our interconnected world.
Right.
It's not about conquering territory.
Okay.
It's about sowing chaos,
Right.
eroding trust, and manipulating perceptions to achieve strategic goals.
That's a chilling thought, but isn't this something that's been happening for centuries?
Yeah.
How is this different from, say, the propaganda used during the Cold War?
That's a great question. And the difference lies primarily in scale, speed, and reach. During the Cold War, propaganda was largely confined to traditional media.
Right.
Radio broadcasts, newspapers, television. It was a slower, more centralized process.
Yeah.
Now, with the internet and social media, disinformation can spread like wildfire.
Wow.
It can be micro-targeted to specific individuals and groups, amplified by algorithms and disguise to look like authentic content.
Right.
It's incredibly difficult to combat,
Yeah.
even for sophisticated intelligence agencies.
So with all this in mind, what does this mean for us,
Right.
the average person trying to make sense of the world?
Right.
Are we all just pawns in this global game of information chess?
That's the crucial question, and it leads us to one of the most important takeaways from our deep dive today.
Okay.
The importance of critical thinking.
Right.
In a world where information is weaponized, the ability to analyze, evaluate, and discern truth from falsehood is more crucial than ever.
So it's not about retreating from the world of information, but equipping ourselves with the tools and skills to navigate it effectively.
Precisely. It's about becoming informed consumers of information,
Right.
not passive recipients.
Yeah.
And it's not just about protecting ourselves from manipulation.
Okay.
It's about preserving the very foundations of a functioning society. If we can't agree on basic facts,
Yeah.
if we're constantly questioning each other's motives and drowning in a sea of disinformation,
Right.
then it becomes incredibly difficult to address the real challenges we face as a global community.
Okay, so we've talked about historical examples,
Right.
modern frameworks, and the role of information in this new type of warfare. But where's this all heading?
Yeah.
What does the future of psychological warfare look like?
That's where things get really fascinating
Okay.
and potentially even more concerning, because the next major player in this game is artificial intelligence.
AI. This is starting to feel like a spy thriller.
Yeah.
I'm curious, have there been any confirmed cases of AI being used for psychological warfare?
Well, while there haven't been any publicly confirmed cases of AI being deployed as a primary weapon in warfare, its potential applications are becoming increasingly clear.
Okay.
And frankly, a bit unsettling.
Yeah.
AI has the potential to be a game changer in so many ways.
Yeah.
First, it's incredibly efficient.
Okay.
AI can automate many of the tasks that previously required human effort,
Right.
from collecting and analyzing data
Yeah.
to creating and disseminating propaganda.
Okay.
This means that psychological operations can be carried out on a much larger scale and at a much faster pace than ever before.
So it's like having an army of digital propagandists
Right.
working 24/7, spreading messages tailored to specific individuals and groups.
Exactly. And second, AI is incredibly precise.
Okay.
It can process vast amounts of data about individuals, from their social media activity to their purchasing habits, to create incredibly detailed psychological profiles.
Right.
This allows propagandists to tailor their messages to specific audiences with laser-like accuracy.
So it's not just about spreading generic propaganda anymore.
No.
It's about crafting personalized messages designed to exploit each individual's unique vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
We're talking about weaponizing information on an incredibly personal level.
Precisely. And to make matters even more complex,
Yeah.
AI is constantly evolving.
Wow.
New techniques and tools are being developed all the time, making it even harder to detect and defend against these types of attacks. Think of it like an arms race,
Okay.
where the attackers are constantly one step ahead of the defenders.
Right.
It's a constant game of cat and mouse,
Yeah.
trying to stay ahead of the curve.
This all sounds incredibly complex and potentially dangerous.
It can be.
But are there any ways to combat this?
Yeah.
Or are we all doomed to be manipulated by increasingly sophisticated AI systems?
It's not a hopeless situation, but it does require a multifaceted approach.
Okay.
One key element is technological innovation.
Okay.
We need to invest in research and development of AI-powered tools that can detect and counter disinformation.
Right.
Think of it as building digital antibodies
Okay.
to combat the spread of information viruses.
So fighting fire with fire.
In a sense.
Using AI to defend ourselves against AI-powered attacks.
Right. But it's not just about technology.
Okay.
It's also about education.
Mm-hmm.
We need to equip people with the critical thinking skills necessary to identify and resist manipulation.
Okay.
This means teaching them how to evaluate sources,
Right.
recognize logical fallacies,
Mhm.
and understand the ways in which information can be distorted and weaponized.
So it's about empowering individuals to be more discerning consumers of information.
Exactly.
To be more critical of what they see and hear online.
Right. And it's also about fostering a culture of media literacy.
Okay.
We need to teach people how to navigate the complex information landscape,
Yeah.
to understand the difference between reliable sources and those that are pushing a particular agenda.
Right.
We need to help people develop a healthy skepticism
Yeah.
without succumbing to cynicism or distrust of all information.
Okay, so we've got the technological side and the educational side. But are there any other strategies that could be effective in combating this new wave of AI-powered psychological warfare?
One area that often gets overlooked is collaboration.
Okay.
This isn't something any one country or organization can tackle alone.
Right.
We need to see greater cooperation between governments, tech companies, researchers, and civil society organizations.
Okay.
We need to share information, best practices, and resources to effectively counter these threats.
So it's about building a global alliance against disinformation.
Right.
A kind of collective immune system for the digital age.
Exactly. And that brings us to another crucial point. Regulation.
Okay.
We need to have serious conversations about the ethical implications of AI
Right.
and develop clear guidelines for its development and deployment.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't about stifling innovation.
Okay.
It's about ensuring that AI is used responsibly and ethically,
Right.
that it serves humanity rather than harming it.
So it's about striking a balance between fostering innovation and protecting ourselves from potential harms.
Exactly.
And it sounds like this is a conversation that needs to happen sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. The pace of technological advancement is only accelerating,
Right.
and the potential consequences of inaction are immense.
Wow.
We need to act now to ensure that AI is used for good, not for ill.
It's a lot to consider, especially this idea that even with all our human ingenuity, we might be outmatched by our own creations when it comes to psychological warfare.
Right.
But before we spiral into a dystopian nightmare, is there any hope?
Yeah.
Could AI also be used to fight back against disinformation and manipulation?
That's a crucial point to consider.
Okay.
AI isn't inherently good or bad.
Right.
It's a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for constructive or destructive purposes.
Right.
Just as AI can be used to create incredibly persuasive propaganda,
Mm-hmm.
it can also be used to detect and debunk that same propaganda.
So it's like a digital shield.
Yeah.
Protecting us from this onslaught of misinformation.
In a way, yes.
Okay.
Imagine AI algorithms that can scan the internet for fake news,
Okay.
identifying patterns and inconsistencies that humans might miss,
Right.
or AI systems that can analyze social media trends to detect coordinated disinformation campaigns.
Mm.
These tools could help us identify and flag potentially harmful content before it spreads widely.
That's a much more optimistic perspective.
Right.
So we're not just passively accepting that AI is going to manipulate us all.
Right.
We can fight back.
Yeah.
Use our own technological ingenuity to level the playing field.
Exactly. And it goes beyond simply playing defense.
Okay.
AI could also be used to educate people about critical thinking skills,
Right.
helping them develop the mental tools to resist manipulation.
Okay.
Imagine interactive AI programs that teach people how to identify logical fallacies,
Okay.
evaluate sources,
Yeah.
and recognize biased language.
Okay.
These programs could be tailored to different age groups and learning styles, making them accessible to a wide audience.
So it's like giving everyone a mental toolkit,
Right.
empowering them to be more discerning consumers of information.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And AI could even be used to foster empathy and understanding between people with different viewpoints.
Okay.
Imagine AI-powered platforms that facilitate constructive dialogue,
Right.
helping people see different perspectives and find common ground.
Yeah.
This could be especially valuable in addressing issues that are often polarized or emotionally charged.
This all sounds incredibly promising,
Yeah,
but it also seems incredibly complex.
it is.
How do we even begin to develop and implement these kinds of solutions on a global scale?
It's certainly a daunting challenge,
Yeah.
but not an insurmountable one.
Okay.
It requires a collaborative effort between governments, tech companies, researchers, educators, and civil society organizations.
Right.
We need to see a global commitment to ethical AI development, one that prioritizes human well-being and societal resilience.
So it's not just about technological innovation.
Right.
It's about ethical innovation as well,
Yeah.
about ensuring that our values keep pace with our technological advancements.
Exactly. And that brings us back to you, our listener.
Okay.
You're a crucial part of this conversation.
Right.
The future of AI isn't predetermined. It's something we're all shaping
Yeah.
through the choices we make and the actions we take.
Right.
By staying informed, engaging in these conversations,
Yeah.
and demanding ethical and responsible AI development.
Right.
You're playing an active role in shaping a future where technology empowers rather than manipulates.
Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
From ancient battlefields to cutting-edge AI.
Yeah.
It's been fascinating, thought-provoking, and at times a bit unnerving.
Right.
But if there's one key takeaway I hope our listeners leave with, it's this.
The human mind is the ultimate battleground.
Hmm.
And in this new age of information warfare, where the lines between reality and fabrication are increasingly blurred, we all have a responsibility to be vigilant, to be critical thinkers,
Right.
and to be active participants in shaping a future where truth and reason prevail.
Powerful words to end on.
Thank you.
To our listeners, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.
Absolutely.
And as always, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.